much for joining us. It is Tuesday, November 29th. I'm Amy Corr, and I'm joined by Kevin Van Eck, and we are live out of our Goose Island studio. We hope all of you had an amazing Thanksgiving holiday season. But guess what? It's time to get back to it. So make sure you've got your cup filled with your coffee, tea, power smoothie, whatever it is that you are going to have to start your day. And let's jump into the next episode of Coffee with Amy and Kevin.
That's right. Let's just jump right in. So speaking of Thanksgiving, Amy was telling me, you were telling me that you had listened to a podcast, and I think you might be able to guess which podcast if you've listened to Coffee at all over the last 2 years, but listen to a podcast that we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, so it was Bigger Pockets Real Estate, and it was actually episode 683. We're going to actually include a link to the full episode if you're interested in listening to it. But what I loved about it is that it just reminded me of so many of the things we should be thinking about in real estate when it comes to negotiating, working with our clients, and working with colleagues, with other agents, when we're doing deals. And it reminded me of the fact that we're in a very emotional business, right? There's a lot of high stress and emotion going on with almost everybody, clients, but even sometimes agents as well. But it also focused on the science of it, which is that our brains are largely negative. And we usually do that because it's a survival mode, right? We kind of want to make sure that, if there's any danger out there, we immediately are in a negative space to protect ourselves. But what this podcast talks about is that if you are that you are actually 31% smarter if you are in a positive frame of mind. And when you're in a positive frame of mind, you make better decisions. So I loved that because it kind of made me thinking about, we need to do a better job working with our clients to get everybody teed up into a positive mindset.
Yeah, that's great. And this podcast has, Chris Voss, an ex-hostage negotiator, someone that I'm sure all of you know because of his book, Never Split the Difference. So we're going to talk through 3 things that Amy heard about how to have winning conversations, not only with your clients, but also with colleagues in situations where we're negotiating.
Yeah. So the first one, which I absolutely loved, is Chris talks about the idea that you always let people know when they're going to hear from you next. And he actually shared a story about one of his colleagues. He said he was actually the most favorite of all hostage negotiators. I don't know how you become a favorite hostage negotiator, but what he had said is that all of the people, the families that he interacted with, I think his name was Ted, they said that they absolutely loved him because Ted always let them know when they were going to hear from him next. Whether it was an hour, whether it was 2 hours, whether it was a day, he would always make sure they knew exactly when they would hear from him next. And the reason why they said that this works so well is that when people feel like they have no idea when they're going to hear good or bad news again, they stress and go into an emotional frenzy for that whole period of time. But if you tell them, hey, I'm going to call you in 2 hours, they can withstand that 2 hours of stress. So if you anchor or give them a time frame to work off of, and I thought that that was so great because think about how often our clients will call us and they'll be stressed out because they haven't heard from us. So I love this little technique and I encourage you to think about using it when you are working with your clients. So, make sure that you schedule when you're going to check in with them. And what Chris talks about is that you don't even have to have new information to share. He said, data about the market or the fact that no one's calling and no one is scheduling showings. He said that is data and information that you can share. So I loved that idea. I know we've, encouraged people to do that again, but it was just something that sounded so smart. And he actually finished with saying that there is an agent in Australia and she has this amazingly high referral percentage of her business from past clients. And he said it's because she specifically uses this technique to make sure that she is always letting them know when they're going to hear from her. So I thought it was an awesome technique, and I just think a great reminder for all of us.
That is. I mean, it feels good for the client, right? Because they're not worrying or going into the negative, but also it's good to hold us accountable. If you already know when you're supposed to be calling, then they don't fall off your radar.
Yeah,
right?
And then they're not chasing you.
Yeah.
I think that's actually more stressful when you need to call somebody and you haven't gotten to it yet,
yes.
And then the caller ID shows their name and you think, they beat me to it. So anyway, structuring and communicating when you're going to communicate with your clients, I think will be really helpful, especially as we're navigating the market the end of this year and into next year.
Yeah, I love that. Number 2 then is de-escalating with empathy. It's really using tactical empathy to get to where we want to go. So when the brain tries to protect itself, so we're talking with a client or a colleague who's trying to protect themselves in this negotiation, putting ourselves in a place where they feel understood by what we say. So it's calling out how they're feeling before they feel it. So one thing might be, if we're submitting, let's say, a low offer to a colleague, we say, I know you're going to think I'm a bad guy for submitting this low offer. We call out and say what they're going to think before they do, because it de-escalates the emotion that Amy was talking about happens in every transaction. It could happen with a client as well. When you're delivering a counteroffer, you say, I know you're going to be disappointed, or it seems like you might be upset by this, or I know you think that we're trying to steal this property. Any of these things, if you call out how you know they're going to feel understood when you say it. And that's only going to allow you to be able to get to where you want to go in terms of the negotiation, because they'll be more receptive because they feel like you understand where they are coming from.
Yeah, I love that one. And I think it's such a great strategy to kind of just break that tension sometimes that you feel when you are getting ready to submit something or tell somebody maybe not the greatest of news. And then the last one that I really liked, and this is something that even for myself, I was trying to practice it this morning with Kevin, so you might have to practice this technique a little bit, but it is really impactful if you can start integrating it into the way that you're negotiating. And it's using no to get what you want, which probably sounds counterintuitive, and I think we're always afraid that clients or other agents are going to use the word no and say no and just shut us down. But actually what Chris talks about is when people are forced to say yes. So if you ask them a question and you force them to answer yes, they actually become more uncomfortable because they feel like they're giving you something that they're not ready to give you. When they are able to use the word no, it doesn't mean no and that's the end of it. No makes them feel safe and comfortable that they've got some control in the communication. And it makes them feel like, okay, you know, I can respond back. So a couple of cool examples that I wrote down is, let's say you're on a listing presentation and you're trying to get the listing signed. You could ask a seller, can I get you to sign the agreement? Right? And they may want to sign it, but getting them to say yes, sometimes that can put them in an uncomfortable spot. Instead, you can maybe change that exact question into something that allows them to say no. And that would be, are you against signing the listing agreement? Or are you against signing the listing agreement today? Right? And your hope is that they say no. But the idea is that you are putting them in a position where they say no, and then they can continue to give you more back. But it gets them comfortable. Another example of this is, instead of saying to another colleague, let's say you're negotiating, do you think it makes sense for us to make a deal work with our clients? Now, probably their answer might be yes, but again, them mentally, and the way it's set up in their mind, them saying yes might make them feel a little bit defensive, where if you change it just slightly and say, are you against trying to get this deal to work for our clients? Kevin, are you against trying to get this deal to work for our clients?
No.
Right, it works. Perfect. And then the idea is, no, he isn't trying against it. He actually wants to make it happen. So it's amazing though, because the psychology really is getting people to use and say the word no is going to actually make them feel more comfortable and collaborative when you are talking with them, when you're negotiating with them. So anyway, those were 3 awesome things from this podcast that I listened to. I really encourage you. I mean, there was a ton of other things in there, a lot of good nuggets, but I really encourage you to check it out because it can really help you when you're working with your clients and your colleagues.
Yeah, and I think you said something really important, which is practice, right? You can't just watch one episode of Coffee and go out there and try these things.
I obviously need to practice some of my questions.
It worked. I said no. But the idea is you got to practice these things. So pick one maybe to focus on for now. And once you've integrated that, then maybe choose a second. Come back to this episode. Listen to podcast 683.
Yes,
Bigger
it was on
Pockets,
November 3rd, I think. Yep,
awesome.
Originally aired. Yeah.
And thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Until we see you next Tuesday, make it a great week. And remember, you got this.